Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
We got work.
I don't really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today. I don't want to.
I thought it was only fair that we establish where my head is right now at the beginning of the show. That could be our new Friday refrain. Because you know what? It's been a rough month. It's been a rough month for all of us, but I appreciate that you are here this Friday, November 22nd. You may recall I officially declared to no one in particular that, in my opinion, the holiday season started last Sunday. So happy holidays. I hope you're going to have a wonderful Thanksgiving and that your relatives are either tolerable or absent. We got to be real here. Okay, we've got to be real. We've got to pace ourselves. We have, at the very least, to stay focused until the midterm elections and see if we can pull something out of the fire then. And you can't do everything, but you've got to figure out what you care about. Okay? You care about books? Get involved with your local library. Or that national effort that we always talk about with Deborah Caldwell Stone about banned books. You know, go to the American Library Association website. Join the fight against banned books. What is near and dear to your heart? Immigrant rights, lots of organizations that you can get involved with. Female autonomy, protecting abortion, tons of ways to get involved with that. Maybe you're a political geek who loves legislation. There are tons of political organizations. One of the ideas that was submitted to us via text that I shared with Andy Miles, and he thinks it's a great idea, on the Heartland Signal website, we are going to work very hard to try to create a space that has information, things like, you know, books we're recommending, organizations, activities. Well, who's your local Democratic Party? Your local Democratic organization. Maybe go to a meeting. See if that feels right for you. There are tons and tons and tons of ways to get involved, to stay involved during this long, dark winter of the soul that we are experiencing. You can't do everything, but you can do something. Even if it is just from the comfort of your couch, there are always things that you can do. You know, the holiday season is coming around. Is there a food pantry that, you know, you could call them up and say, hey, you know what? What do you most need in the coming weeks? Because I read an article once that most of the stuff that people drop off is, well, I mean, obviously they'd rather have something than nothing. But people don't realize that most food pantries don't just take stuff that's in boxes or stuff that's in cans. And, you know, if you're going to drop off 6 boxes of Hamburger Helper, it would be nice if you actually dropped off the hamburger as well. Most food pantries would like to see more fresh produce, eggs, fresh food. They would like to see that donated. But, you know, go on your computer, which I'm assuming you've got, or your phone, and put in a search engine, food pantry near me, or better yet, put in your zip code, food pantry near, and then add your zip code. Call them up. What is it that you guys really like to get? Is there a certain day that it would be best for me to drop whatever that is off? Easy peasy. I have some neighbors who, when they go grocery shopping at the Jewels, they always look to see what's on clearance. And if there's something that looks like it's good and reasonably healthy, they'll buy a bunch of it and take it to the food pantry on their way home. But you know what? If you're going to donate boxes of mac and cheese, maybe you want to also donate cartons of milk, if that's how it's supposed to be made. Again, you want to donate hamburger helper? Donate the hamburger as well as the helper. Call your local food pantry. They will tell you. But from what I understand, most likely it's perishables. Things like butter. Nobody ever thinks of donating butter to the food pantry, but there are a lot of recipes. There's lots of food you can't make without butter. Oil. How about olive oil? Canola oil. Avocado oil. Think beyond cans and boxes, okay? And call your local food pantry, and I promise you, they will tell you what they would most like to see walk in the door. So you can't do everything, but you can do something. And hopefully over the next month, you'll have a few days off of work, and you can do something that helps other people, and you can do something that helps you. I'm taking all next week off. So I'm going to go do something with my daughter, who's in from California. She's probably going to make me do things that are like hiking and biking because that's what she likes. But for her, I'll do it because I prefer to be more of a sloth. I'm a kind of a lay on the couch and eat soup and bonbons kind of a gal. But for my daughter, I will get my butt up off the couch and do some sort of horrific, horrible activity like bike riding. You've got to do that too, okay? Some interesting news. Oh, by the way, this is Friday. For those of you who have not tuned in on Fridays before, the first half of the show, we are taking your calls. Nothing but calls up until 3:30. So get your dialing finger ready. Lady B is ready, poised to speak to you. Matt Gaetz, I told you that he resigned from the 118th Congress to be Attorney General. Trump seemed all in until supposedly Trump was told by someone that there absolutely were not going to be the votes in the Senate. Most of the Republican senators, remember, Trump said, just go recess and let me make appointments. Apparently, one of the more conservative members of the Senate, a Republican, said recently, well, you know what? We'll do that for the lesser appointment. Like, if he's going to appoint somebody to the National Labor Relations Board, fine, let him. But we are definitely going to hold confirmation hearings on each and every one of his selections for his cabinet. That is too important. So it was very clear that Matt Gaetz simply didn't have the votes. That was told to Donald Trump. Donald Trump supposedly, he can't really believe everything that they say, but supposedly Donald Trump called up Gaetz and said, I've been told you don't have the votes, you won't have the votes. And that's when Gaetz decided to withdraw his name. And I thought, oh, yeah, he's got really nothing to lose. He's been flirting with a run for governor of Florida, and he was elected to the 119th Congress. All he can do is say, okay, well, fine. I resigned from the 118th, but I will be sworn in January 3rd with the 119th. But he has apparently decided that his time in Congress is over. I know. Isn't that interesting? I mean, it can't be because everybody in Congress hates him, even his own party, because they've hated him for a while now. You know? He didn't seem to care that they hated him before. I don't know why he would care going forward. I mean, everybody hates Ted Cruz, and he doesn't resign. So maybe he's just decided that if he is indeed going to make a run to be the next governor of Florida, God help Florida, that it's something that he needs to put all of his effort behind. I can't imagine he got his tiny little feelings hurt, right? I don't know, maybe he was afraid that if he went back to the Congress in January, that they would then feel that they had to release the ethics report, and maybe he felt that might impair his chances to run for office in Florida. He's got an angle. I haven't quite figured out what it is, but I promise you he has an angle. Matt Gaetz isn't somebody that he's not doing this because he got his tiny little feelings hurt and he just wants to go away and lick his wounds. Everybody's hated him practically from the day he entered Congress. He should be used to it by now. But he has said, he's made it official. He told some right-wing podcaster, yes, I'm done. I'm not going back. I'm not going back. So Pam Bondi, she was Attorney General in Florida. She's going to be just as bad as him. She's going to rubber stamp everything Trump wants. Remember Pam Bondi? I had forgotten about that connection. There was an investigation of Trump going on in the state of Florida, and it was up to her office to file charges against him. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump made a $25,000 donation to Pam Bondi's reelection campaign. And very shortly thereafter, she made the announcement that she just didn't think the charges against him were worth pursuing. So, she's a grifter. She'll fit perfectly in. She should be, at that level of grift, she should really be a member of the Trump family. But she's, he bought her off once. And this is not a woman of conviction. It's going to be real interesting because I don't think much of Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's criminal attorney, who was made Deputy Attorney General. But Todd Blanche, at least from what we saw of him, was not corrupt. He may have tried to use every legal trick in the book on Trump's behalf. You could argue that that's what you want any lawyer who's defending you to do. Obviously, being named Deputy Attorney General was his reward. I wonder how that Blanche Bondi is going to work. Is he just going to kowtow to her if he thinks that something is amiss? I don't know. I do not know. I think there's going to be a lot of infighting in this administration because people aren't being chosen because of expertise. People are being chosen because of their fealty to Trump, which means that when it comes to actually doing whatever job they've been assigned to do, they will probably do it very poorly. And when nobody has expertise, everybody's an expert. Just like I think at some point the Elon Musk-Donald Trump bromance is, we may not ever see a blow-up, but we may see some distance put there because they both think they are the smartest guy in the room. And I'm sure at this point they both feel they're using one another. And they are, Anyway, I think in addition to the horrible things that he does to the people of this country, I think it's going to be really horrible to be in his administration. I think there's going to be infighting and backbiting and 2 years from now, whatever cabinet gets installed, I bet you 2 years from now, at least one or two of them are gone or have been replaced. That's my prediction. By the way, Judge Juan Merchan has agreed to delay Donald Trump's sentencing. Remember, he was convicted of 34 counts of fraud? Yeah, remember that? He is going to take under consideration a move that Trump lawyers are making that says, well, now that he's president, the whole thing should be thrown out, which I'm not quite sure. They've got a good, solid argument for that, but Merchan said he would let them file the paperwork and he would look it over. And he has not said when Donald Trump will be sentenced for his 34 felonies. The common wisdom seems to be that he will either say, I will sentence him in, after January 20th, 2028, when he's not president anymore, which it could happen. He could say, guy's president, we're going to put this off in January, after January 20th, 2028, then that's when I will announce the sentence. He could also, and a lot of this depends on Alvin Bragg in New York and what he wants the judge to do, what he says he's willing to go along with or not. Alvin Bragg could also say, we proved our point. We said he was guilty. He was clearly guilty. He was found guilty. That's good enough for us. Basically you can put the sentencing in limbo forever. Many things could happen. A couple of other notes. I know that there's a lot of callers, so I will start shutting up soon. Remember, if you do any holiday shopping over the Thanksgiving holiday, shop local, shop local, shop local. Don't give your money to Amazon. If you absolutely have to order things over the interwebs, order from Nordstrom.com, order from Target.com. They did not donate to Donald Trump's campaign. You need more holiday decorations and lights? Go to Lowe's. Don't go to Home Depot. Lowe's did not donate to Donald Trump's campaign. You're thinking maybe this Christmas you're going to get a membership at one of those warehouse clubs? Go to Costco, not Sam's Club. Costco did not donate to Donald Trump. Walmart did. Shop local. Oh, and if you really want to get something creative over the interwebs, go to Etsy. Don't shop at Amazon. Jeff Bezos does not deserve your money. Okay. Let's go to Cindy, calling from Bull Valley, Illinois. Hey, Cindy, thanks for the call.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good.
I'm a pretty political person, but my comment is not political.
Okay.
What I wanted to say is when you were talking about food banks, I've heard where people will go shopping like at Jewel, and I'm sure there's other grocery stores that do the same thing where you buy one and you get one for free. You may not need the second one, but pick it up and donate it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to add that because I think, like when I shop, I always see buy one, get one free. And I just think that's a great little thing for holidays or any time.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Absolutely a wonderful idea. Like I said, my neighbors always look to see what's been marked down, and that's what, they don't obviously hang on to it. They buy that as part of their grocery shopping, and then they drive right to the food pantry. So it's not like they're giving anything that's out of date or expired. Just things that are a little bit discounted. So, yes, wonderful idea. Buy one, get one free. Yep. Take the second one to your local food pantry.
Yep, that's it.
Thanks,
Keep up
Cindy.
the
That's a
good
great
work.
idea.
Keep up the good work.
Thank
Love
you. Thank you. Let's go to our good friend Jim from Chicago. Hello, Jim. How are you?
Hi, Joan. I'm reliving the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, God, no. Jesus, you're in a bad place.
Yeah, but it goes like this. I'm in the 7th grade, and I volunteered to cross the kids because I would volunteer for a firing squad to get out of class. So anyway, I'm crossing the kids, and one of my crazy friends comes skipping down the street. He goes, Nixon did it. I go, what do you mean? He goes, oh, Kennedy was shot. So we got into the classroom, and the nun had the radio on, and everybody's silent, and he passed away around 3 o'clock in that afternoon. So it was a routine. My father died young, and his brother would take us up to the country. His brother and his wife, they didn't have any children. Take me and my brother and 3 of our cousins up to the country every Friday. So we get in the car, and we used to play 3/4 of a ghost. I can't remember how the game was played, but you name a letter, and so you get to it. But this particular evening, nobody was talking. Everybody was in shock. But my Uncle Pat said, he goes, Oswald will never get out of jail alive. I said, Pat, what do you mean? I said, they'll put him in a lead safe. I said, they got to keep him alive because he'll never get out of jail alive. And that's all he said. So now it's Sunday morning, and my 2 cousins smoked, and I was smoking, and he didn't want us to smoke in front of him because he wanted to tell my mother that he was allow us to smoke. So we pretended we were going to go to mass, and we got our cigarettes. We crossed against this. It was the sand pits, and we get to it like it was a little general store there. We get a pop. And anyway, we walk in, and sure enough, on the television, here comes Oswald. And I'm staring at it, and sure enough, he gets plugged in the basement of that Dallas,
when they were transferring him,
yeah, but that was a botch, a complete botch job. But he called the shot. But what's the thing that's I'm not frightened about any of this nonsense, and I'm glad you got a week off, Joe, because anybody needs it. Anybody needs it. You need it, and just to get away from. Because the reality is, you can't fool everybody all the time, and you can't be a bully all the time. And even the senators, Republican senators, they've got to go home to their wives and children. They can't be bullied. Nobody wants to be bullied, Joe.
No. And, nobody wants to be disrespected that way. Hey, Jim, I'm curious. You said you were at Catholic school. So was I. The nuns went out into the hallway, and they were all talking with their heads together and whispering and crying. But none of them, I think I was in 2nd grade then. None of them ever came in and told us what was going on. Did the nuns actually tell you what was going on, or did you just overhear it on the radio they were listening to?
No. We were old enough to, and this particular nun was mean enough to put the radio on. I don't think she would shelter us anyway. But anyway, but you know what was really interesting, Joan? Years later, the Democratic government, when I was in college at Rosary College, is now... what do they call it now? Dominican University, But a nun got up and asked McCarthy. I think McCarthy came to the school to speak. And before the assassination, and she said to him, some politician, she said, why is Kennedy driving around in a convertible? And she said McCarthy's face turned absolutely, or whoever this politician was, turned like diabolical. He said, the Kennedys can take care of themselves. The Kennedys can take care of themselves. But... just think what a beautiful time it was. I went to school on his legislation, and Lyndon Johnson. Look at HUD housing, the voters' rights. Think of all the marvelous things that happened in the '60s.
Yeah.
But, the assassinations, it was like a trigger of assassination. Martin Luther King gets killed. And then,
Bobby Kennedy Jr., JFK, I know.
Right. It was tragic. Just a tragic. But still, their legislation hung on there for years and years and years. And I just hope and pray that, this Project 2025, I don't know why Leonard Leo or anybody would want to attempt to deconstruct that legislation because it's only helped people. I went to school.
I don't understand that myself, Jim. I think it's the only thing I can think of is that it's some kind of white man derangement syndrome. I really do believe there are people, particularly white men who have experienced some power, who really in their bones feel that somehow they are by birth just better, smarter, that they should be the ones making the decisions for the rest of us because we're just too stupid to really have an idea of what's best for us. I don't know. I really don't.
But why attack it? Why attack this religious right, whatever they are, right? They're not nothing that I understand. Or these people attacking the Constitution or the Supreme Court that demands that because the Dobbs decision was definitely religious. That was a religious decision. Yeah. It'll be visited.
It was a religious decision covered. With this Supreme Court, they decide what they want and then they twist the law to fit. Yes, exactly. I'm very worried about that. There was an article I read this morning about how in Texas, certain lessons based on the Bible are going to be, at the very least, offered as an alternate curriculum at public schools. Okay, all right,
insane.
Jim. I'm past time for a break.
I know you do, Sean. Just have a great week. Have a great week, Sean. And take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
You too, Jim. We're going to take that break a little bit late, but we're taking it. We'll be right back after this.
Get social with WCPT 820 and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WCPT 820.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito. Join the conversation now at 773-763-9278.
Trying to use the phone.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
If you want to take my advice and shop local, or you're just looking for something fun to do, look to Axios Chicago and Block Club. Block Club has a shop local directory depending upon where you live, and Axios Chicago has a whole bunch of places that you can go and stuff that you can do. It is going to be this weekend is going to be the Mag Mile Lights. So I think that's actually tomorrow. So there's lots of stuff to do and there's lots of good food to eat. Look into all of that. We got another caller about John F. Kennedy's assassination. Steve from Park Ridge is on the phone. Steve, please go ahead.
Hi, Joan. How are you?
I'm okay.
Love your show. I love WCPT. I've been listening to the station for over 10 years, way before you came on. In any event, I was a freshman in high school, on November 22nd, and it was about 1 o'clock, and the principal came on, and in a very sad voice, he said, I'm here to inform you that President Kennedy was slain in Dallas, Texas. And that was I'm 75. That, for my generation, was the beginning of the end of the age of innocence, the age of Camelot. Because Kennedy was such a vibrant, charismatic, just, everything you'd want in a leader, albeit he did have he had a fancy for the ladies. But that aside, he definitely was a real progressive Democrat, as his brother was. And it bears remembrance of a great American like he on a day like today that, compared to Trump, Kennedy was like a saint, and Trump is the bottom of the barrel. Look at how far we've come in 61 years.
Yeah. Yep. I remember that day as well. It was a dark day.
You weren't a freshman in high school, though.
No, I wasn't. I was
younger,
in grade school. But I was in Catholic grade school, so, man, it was like a personal attack. The way I was taught by Notre Dame nuns for about 12 years. They were so proud of the fact that he was the first Catholic president. That meant so much. It didn't mean much to me because I was little, but, it meant a lot to all the people in the parish.
Kennedy's speeches and then Bobby Kennedy's speeches were just so inspiring. They were so transcendent. I mean, they were like FDR reincarnated.
Yep, they inspired people. Remember when people used to be inspired instead of angry after a politician's speech?
Exactly. And, it might behoove the younger generation that listens to the show to look Kennedy up on Wikipedia, for example, and just see the kind of man he was and some of the things that he did prior to his death. And I do think he set the table for Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. I think it would have become Kennedy's Great Society had it not been for the assassination. I'm going to say one more thing. There are certain days like the Challenger disaster, the assassination of Bobby, the assassination of Martin Luther King. There's certain events, not all bad, but many of them bad, that, live in infamy that, we can't forget. And we can't forget where we were at the time that we first learned of it.
Yeah, and that's true.
Else.
Like 9/11. It's one of those where you remember where you were, you remember what you were doing. When there are major world events, they really stick with you, don't they?
They really do. I can remember exactly where I was when the first plane hit and then the second. And as an aside, my wife was in New York City during 9/11, and my two younger children at the time, were afraid for Mom, albeit she was safe. She wasn't in the Twin Towers. But to get home, because all of the airlines were closed for 3 or 4 days, she had to, rent a car to come home. And that, as you just reminded me, yes, I know exactly where I was, and I'm sure the listeners do as well. But I just wanted to, give a shout-out to Kennedy's memory. Rest in peace, sir. You were a great American.
Yes, he was. Thank you so much for that call. I appreciate it, and I appreciate having the discussion, Steve. I don't think we can take one more call before we go to break. Let's go to Michael, who's on the line from Chicago. Hi, Michael.
Yes, I like to talk about the TIF program, TIF. Tax Increment Funding Program. Yeah. Now, this is being kept kind of a secret in Chicago. A lot of Chicago citizens, they've never heard of TIF. They've never heard of that term. But it's a big program.
I think the people who listen to this radio station are somewhat familiar with it. It's something that we talk about from time to time. But go ahead.
Well, okay. Well, I still think it's kept a secret. And right now, there's about $1.5 billion, $1.5 billion of money in excess TIF amounts of money. They're just sitting in banks, not doing anybody any good. Now, the TIF is supposed to help development, build up buildings in certain geographic areas.
There was something in the news over the last week. There was a $15 million TIF grant given to an organization, a Franciscan organization that's buying a building and is going to make it into a 100-bed shelter. But I agree with you. The money, most of the time, it sort of feels like the money is just sort of sitting there as a slush fund for who's ever in power.
Exactly. And I want to say that this TIF money, $1 billion worth of it, should be used now. We have an emergency with our schools and our basic city services. And it's a big fuss that the mayor wanted to increase for $300 million, take out a loan. First he wanted a loan Then he says we're going to raise property taxes by $300 million. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't take out a loan, high interest loan.
Now he's reduced it to only wants to raise taxes $128 million since the city council shot him down on the 300.
Yeah, but really we should use the TIF money. And the hypocrisy of it is...
Sometimes they do, and I'm not quite sure. I don't know exactly how the legality is, how that money is set up, but we have had mayors in the past that did use TIF money for budget shortfalls. It hasn't been discussed yet, and I don't know why, and I don't know what the rules are when it comes to spending it. But I agree with you. I mean, anything just other than letting it sit there for no reason.
And I like to say that Mayor Johnson himself, Brandon Johnson, he used TIF money in his first term. He used a lot of it to balance the budget in his first year term. But in the second yearly term, he doesn't want to use it. He's hesitant for some reason.
I don't know.
Many mayors have used it. They've used this money to balance the budget. They've used this money, many mayors. And it should be used. We should not raise the property taxes. We should not have a high interest loan. We should use the TIF money. And if we have to use it every single year, we should, because every single year it accumulates. It's called excess TIF money because it accumulates in these TIF districts that are set up for 16 years, a long time, and the money just sits there, and we should use it when there's an emergency.
I agree with you. And I do know that there are some TIFs that are expiring, and the current administration has said, somewhat controversially, that they don't believe that they are going to renew them. But you know what? I'm going to try to find somebody who can answer some of our questions. Okay, Michael?
Yes.
Somebody who really knows the law and what this money can be used for and what it can't, because I agree with you. I mean, I always think it's better to take the money you got sitting around to pay the bills rather than raising taxes. Michael, thank you for the call. We are going to take a real quick break. We're going to be back with more calls right after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
One more thing, as we're talking about the holidays, Blue Man Group. Blue Man Group has been performing in Chicago for nearly 30 years. They have announced that they are going to close up shop January 5th. If you've never seen them, it is a wacky, fun night. Try to sit close to the stage. And wear a raincoat. 30 years, and they are closing their doors permanently. Blue Man Group is gone after January 5th. If you miss them, though I think you've got the holiday season to get your butt over there, but if you miss them, you're going to have to wait till April. Apparently, there's some new theater being built in Orlando, Florida, and they are going to set up a residency in Orlando, Florida at this new theater sometime in April. But if you've never seen it, it's a crazy, fun, wacky night. And it's great for families. It is. It's a good time, and you should see them. If you loved them when you saw them, you should see them again. And if you've never seen them, you should get over there by January 5th. Let's go back to the phone lines. Bobby is on the line from Indiana. What is our Indiana correspondent going to bring to us today? Hey, Bobby.
Hello, John. I hope you have a good time with
my daughter. Yeah, she's gonna run me around, and I'm gonna be sore and achy. But it's I probably wouldn't get any exercise if it wasn't for her.
Yeah, well, I think she's from what you said. I got to laugh because you said when she was picking schools, there was one that you said, well, why don't you check them out. They sound okay. But she said, no, they're a party school. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's got to be a good kid, because I got a niece that's that way, too. She didn't want to go to, she wanted, and that was my thing about things like that. I said, I'm not going to school for damn parties. I'm going to learn something. Why do I want to spend, So,
yeah. Yes, I did. I really thought that she should at least visit the campus, because there's an addendum to that story, Bobby. They offered her a full ride, and I was like, you know what? Let's just go see it. Maybe it'll feel different once we're there. No, I'm not going. And I was like, oh, please. Oh, let's just go. It didn't work.
Well, I'm sure she's doing what she needs to do.
Yes, she is, and she's very happy. And she decided to go to Oberlin in Ohio, and she was very, very, very happy there. So I guess it turned out for the best.
Maybe she'll help invent the telephone or something. Yeah.
So are you feeling any better? You were kind of down when we talked last.
Basically, I have kind of a floating ground. I go from suicidally depressed to a seething hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And
that sounds about right. That sounds about right.
Yeah, when I try to go to that happy zone in the middle, it just won't take. And every time I do it says, you shouldn't be here. There's no time. What have you got to be? What has anybody got? I said, well, nothing. You're right. And then I throw back one way or the other ping pong. So about in the past 2 weeks, the only high point I've had was before the world completely shattered. In early September, we were at an antique store, which I had no intention of going in, but the buddy I was with, he said, you ever been back here? I said, no, I didn't even know it was here. And I ended up buying something because I said, I've never seen one like this before. I bought a upright desk stand telephone from the late 1920s. They're called candlestick style.
Wow.
And just a couple of nights ago, I'm restoring it, and so it's got the tag on the base with the number. And I said, well, I want to take part of that, and I got another ring I'm going to put on it that's, better. So the tag had the number handwritten on it. And it was like from the 1940s. So I didn't think much about it, but I said, just plain white. That's interesting. And it aged. So I take it out so I could get those metal parts out. And when I take it out, it flips over. And on the back is the original face of the tag, which was meant that tag was the original tag that was on it in the late 20s when it was made. And I said, holy mackerel, well, that's going to go to the top. And I said, I've never seen a number set up like that. But I said, well, it was fairly local because it said Munster. And if you ever know where Munster is, that's right on state line near you guys. And it was a 3-digit phone number. When was the last time you used a 3-digit phone number?
Never. So I do remember when we would go to my grandmother's house when I was little, she had a party line, and you had to pick up the phone and listen because you shared a phone line with another household. And so you had to pick up the phone and listen to see whether or not anybody was talking. to know whether or not you could make your call.
Yes, we had that when we first moved out here, but but we had a full number. But in fact, this phone doesn't even have a dial on it. It was set up that they, for conversion, but it just has a blank cover with that tag holder on it and the 3-digit. Now, that must have been a hell of a boondock at 1930.
Wow.
What about 3 houses out there, I guess?
Gosh.
But I just
well, you know what?
High point.
Are you on Instagram or any social media, Bobby?
No.
So there's no way to see a picture of it.
No, you would have to. If you want to see plenty of pictures, get you some movies from the 30s. And I can think of a movie where you can see dozens of them. Have you ever seen My Girl Friday? Cary Grant.
Yeah.
And Rosalind, about the newspaper business.
Yes.
That's the only phones in there. Western Electric upright desk stands. That's all they have. Most of them are just like this, but theirs mostly have the dial on them. But that's the type. The exact type is what it is.
Wow.
And all through the 30s, they were using those still in the movies. If you want to see pictures of it.
Okay.
But they were made right there in Chicago. But and politics, the other day I did call my congressman, and I just put a bug in his ear that we need to get this report on Matt Gaetz out in the public realm.
Yeah. I don't know. Now that he's withdrawn his nomination, I'm sure that there won't be that same kind of pressure. But here's what I think, Bobby. Too many people have seen that report. There are at least 20 people who worked on that report. Certain depositions that are in it have been leaked. I think that report is going to find its way to the public. But I would like to see our lawmakers take that energy now and focus it on Pete Hegseth, the man who is accused of drugging and raping a woman. Yeah. That's the next. I would like to see Pete and Tulsi Gabbard kicked to the curb.
I told them about. I said the next thing is go after Mr. Hoghead. Yep. And because he is bad news, not just for the ladies, but for the whole world.
Yes, he is. So, he's a bad human being. Bobby, I got to go. I want to try to squeeze in one more call before we go to news.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for the update. Thank you. Let's go to our good friend Ron, who's calling in from Michigan. Ron from Michigan, how are you today?
Hi, Joan. Good. I was waiting for Bobby to say that Dillinger called him on that phone from Crown Point.
Yeah.
But anyway, I called him because I remember John F. Kennedy's assassination. I was a freshman in high school, Schurz High School, and I was taking lunch to my football coach, Coach Schweidahar, in the teacher's little break area, and they had WBBM News Radio on. Mm-hmm. And it was in the morning, late morning, and they were all listening to it. And, so I was one of the first people to hear the broadcast. And among the teachers, they were saying who did it. And they were saying, the John Birch Society or somebody. So already conspiracies were being thrown out there. And when I got home, I asked my mother, I said, Ma, what do you think? Who do you think did it? And she some vaguely, throw out a conspiracy, thing. But yeah, that changed everything. That was.
Yeah.
Those were good times, and they were not good times. So.
Right.
Thank you for
I agree with you. Thanks for calling in and giving us that memory. For those of you who are listening who are really too young to remember RFK and JFK and the assassination also of Martin Luther King, I beg of you to do some reading on it. You know what? And if you really don't feel like doing that, remember, tomorrow, Saturday, at the Chicago History Museum, the Emmett Till exhibit opens. Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy who was tortured and murdered because he whistled at a white woman. That we talked to the curator of that exhibit yesterday, and if you don't really want to spend the time digging into historical writing about some of the things that happened in earlier days, go to the Chicago History Museum. As a matter of fact, if you have time, in addition to the fun museums, the Shed and museums like that, go to the Holocaust Museum as well. The exhibits there and what you can learn are amazing. So try to do a little bit of edification along with your amusement. We've got to take a break for news. We're going to be back with more of your calls and more other stuff right after this.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
The reason that I listen to you from the infamous other side, you will call a spade, and if it's indefensible, you will not defend it. And you know what? I can respect that.
On WCPT 820.
It is Friday, and every Friday we spend the first half of the show taking your calls, talking about the news of the day. Let's go to our good friend Ron, who's calling in from Chicago. Hello, Ron. How are you?
Pretty good. Attorney General Merrick Garland, he indicted Hunter Biden because of a gun application. Will he indict Matt Gaetz because of a affair with a 17-year-old?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And, I was reading in one of my newsletters this morning that part of the reason Gaetz resigned is because there was a second underage teenager that was about to go public with the fact that he had sex with her as well. Supposedly, that CNN was going to break that story, and when they got word of that, that's what happened. Now I want them to get rid of Hegseth. Can we concentrate on getting rid of Hegseth? That would be good. This man is a very, very, very bad man. And I realize that Donald Trump doesn't really believe that sexual assault is a real crime. But, it is, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, even if you're drugged, it's still a crime.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, one more thing, that it's been 61 years since President Kennedy was shot. And has anyone ever brought up the fact that the names John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald, and Donald John Trump, they all have 15 letters in their names. Wow.
Who knows, maybe they were all just born under a bad sign.
Either
I don't know. Supposedly I'm reading conflicting reports. Some reports say that now that Matt Gaetz is gone, that the Republicans in the Senate are gathering around to protect Hegseth. But I don't know. I think Hegseth is every bit as reprehensible as Matt Gaetz. I mean, it's I read a really interesting take on this, that part of the reason, if not the entire reason, that Donald Trump is picking the absolute worst people for agencies is because this is part of what dictators do. They basically want to break the government. They want to destroy our institutions. They don't want them to function because in all that disarray, everyone ends up turning to the president, the leader, for power. If agencies can't function, can't do what they're supposed to do, that it's not actually random. And it was meant to try to get the Republicans in the Senate to roll over and say that they'll just do whatever he wants. And it is also a way, he talks about the deep state. The deep state is basically just our bureaucracy. The civil servants who, no matter who's in power, they come in, they do their job, people get paid, programs, get put into place. They're functionaries. But Donald Trump doesn't like the way the government functions because it functions too independently. And part of the way that you get what you want is to destroy government institutions. And one way to do that is to choose people to lead those institutions who are horribly, horribly unqualified and awful human beings. So, he's not... I don't think he's smart enough to come up with a master plan like this. I think that Leonard Leo and the Heritage Foundation and, all of those far-right donors of his are kind of putting this together. But he's not going to, he's not going to object. He's all about the power.
Right. Mm-hmm. And also I forgot that since Trump was elected, job applications will no longer have this section. Were you ever convicted of a felony? check yes or no.
Yeah, they're going to have to rework that because the only thing he cares about is, are you loyal to Donald Trump? That's the litmus test. If you're loyal to Donald Trump, it doesn't matter if you don't have the qualifications for whatever job he's putting you in. But I'm glad that the Senate has said that they might let some of the lesser appointments be recess appointments, but that every person who is supposed to have a seat in Donald Trump's cabinet is going to be subjected to hearings and a vote. So I can't imagine what it's going to be like listening to Pete Hegseth try to defend over and over again the charges that he drugged and raped a woman in his hotel room.
Yeah. Well, I hope Senator says, take off your shirt. Let's see your tattoos.
Yeah, really. Let's see. Now that tattoo you've got on your chest, that's associated with white supremacy. Would you like to talk about that? Oh my God! It's you know what? If his hearings take place while we're on the air, we're going to have to carry some of it live. I mean, I think it's just going to be. I think it's going to be jaw-dropping.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. We spend the first half of every Friday talking to you, taking your calls, 773-763-9278. And I wanted to share a couple of other things with you. I'm not hanging this on any kind of event or anything. Our good friend, Jasmine Crockett, she is a Texas Democratic congresswoman, and she takes no prisoners. Remember when Marjorie Taylor Greene said something to her about, oh, your false eyelashes must have gotten in the way of your reading this bill, and she told that she wasn't going to listen to somebody with a bleached blonde butch body. Representative Jasmine Crockett speaks truth to power, and recently she was talking about how when a black woman is successful, she's talked about as being a DEI hire, but you never hear anything about white men, and she doesn't understand why white men seem to feel, and this is true. This is a big thing about Republicans. Republican white men would like you to believe that they are oppressed. They're oppressed. Did you not know that? They're oppressed. Anyway, this was just Jasmine Crockett being Jasmine Crockett, and I think you need to hear this today. So, Lady B, let's play that now.
Let me tell you, the reason that my colleagues wanted to make sure you understood the same Black history that your side of the aisle wants to delete out of classrooms is because you can then misuse words like oppression. There has been no oppression for the white man in this country. You tell me which white men were dragged out of their homes. You tell me which one of them got dragged all the way across an ocean and told that you are going to go and work. We are going to steal your wives. We are going to rape your wives. That didn't happen. That is oppression. We didn't ask to be here. We're not the same migrants that y'all constantly come up against. We didn't run away from home. We were stolen. So yeah, we are going to sit here and be offended when you want to sit here and act like, and don't let it escape you that it is white men on this side of the aisle telling us, people of color on this side of the aisle, that y'all are the ones being oppressed, that y'all are the ones that are being harmed. That's not the definition of oppression. You tell me the prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment that you've had, and we can have a conversation.
You could start with Exodus.
The final thing that I will say, diversity works. And until you can show me data that says otherwise, I think that we need to go back to being a country that listens to experts and gets out of our feelings and recognizes, again, that racism is real in this country, and until we stop pretending that it's not, we will not solve the problems that we are consistently facing, and that will bring real unity that we seek when we're looking for a more perfect union.
If you would like to hear Jasmine Crockett again, you can find the story of her now on heartlandsignal.com. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more of your calls right after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820. You know that you can listen to Chicago's Progressive Talk on WCPT AM 820. Stream us live at WCPT820.com and on the TuneIn radio app. Or you can ask Alexa, Siri, or Google to play WCPT from TuneIn. But now you have another option. We're simulcasting our programming overnight, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on WSBC AM 1240 for a clearer reception in and around the city. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. And now overnights on WSBC 1240 AM, where facts matter.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's Progressive Talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Friday. We spend the first half of the show on Friday taking your calls. So let's get back to the phone lines. Laura is on the line from Chicago. Hello, Laura. Thanks for calling in today.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Well, you know what? I'm doing better every minute that goes by.
I feel you. So I just wanted to go back a little bit to when you were talking about Emmett Till.
Yes.
What a lot of people, and it wasn't publicized very well, but a lot of people don't know, in addition to his mother refusing a closed casket because she wanted people to be face-to-face with what they had done to her son. But his accuser, years later, recanted and said that she lied about him caressing her. And she was never brought up on charges.
I was not aware of that. Though I would imagine, I'm not sure whether at that point I would even believe what she was saying, because I can imagine in the outcry and the fact that even years later this is still something that's talked about, I don't imagine life was very easy for her. And, I wonder if indeed, her recanting was a way to take the pressure off. I don't know. I'm just not sure that I would believe somebody who, if she were going to recant, would have been nice if she'd have done it when it would have mattered.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, that is like heartbreaking, but at the same time, she was an older woman and kind of facing the end of life, and it could be one of those things where the guilt that, followed her throughout her life. It's hard to say why she said it, but, either way, it probably should have gotten more press than it did.
Yeah. Well, I think this exhibit is going to really put it front and center in people's minds right here.
Absolutely.
I'm going to try over the holidays to get over to the Chicago History Museum. I know the exhibition doesn't open till tomorrow, but it runs, I had the dates. I think it runs at least till January. I will double check on that. I should know that. But thanks for that little addendum. Where did you read that? Do you remember?
I do not remember where I read it, but I saw it in several different places, and I did a little bit of research on it because I was like, I just was shocked that it wasn't common knowledge because it was such a horrible thing to happen. Yeah. And I guess this happened. Lynchings happen to so many African Americans, but generally they were more mature. It was a child.
Yeah.
And I think that made it all the more shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't even imagine why it wasn't more prevalently thrown out there. Like, that, she wasn't honest. And to me, it really bothers me that after she said something, it wasn't well publicized, and then secondly, there were no ramifications.
Yeah, certainly nobody was brought to justice. Nobody was convicted. That's part of what Charles was telling us, that even though the jury felt that they were guilty, they were not about to stand up against white supremacy. I'm looking at the Chicago History Museum site, and it says that the trial for the murder of Emmett Till opens tomorrow, and it's on the second floor, but I don't see a closing date. So maybe it's an open-ended run, and that they will keep it there as long as it's drawing attention and drawing a good crowd. We shall see. We shall see. But thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
We're going to go to the phone lines once again. Our friend George is on the line from Lamont, Illinois. Hey, George.
Yeah, Joan, I've loved you for years, back to your TV days.
Thank you, George.
But I couldn't hit on you because I'm too old for you. I got a question. Is there anybody that's got any idea as to when Joe Biden might appoint, or if he's going to appoint, 4 Supreme Court justices?
You're talking about expanding the court?
Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is a process that would require a constitutional amendment, which means that the states would need to sign off on it. Now, when FDR was president, just the fact that he threatened to start the process, because initially the Supreme Court was voting down and all the measures of the New Deal he was trying to put in place. And so he made it clear that he was going to expand the court. And then suddenly after that, when FDR's measures came before the court, suddenly they thought that they were okay and that they could stand. So, but no, that is a process that could happen, but it would not be quick. It absolutely would not be quick. Now, Congress, if Congress gets its act together, at least theoretically, Congress can pass laws that say, okay, Supreme Court, you can rule on these kinds of cases, but you cannot rule on these kinds of cases. The Congress could write up an ethics code that they could force on the Supreme Court. Congress has not done that. Congress doesn't seem in the new administration likely to do that. But when I was talking to a Supreme Court expert, the irony is that if Congress passed these laws, guess who would be the final arbiter of whether or not they were constitutional? It would be the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court itself would have to sign off on these laws. So if you're looking for Supreme Court reform, you better plan on living a lot more years, George.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I want you to know that because I'm telling you that you've got to find something to do, something to bring you joy. Remember? Okay. Well, one of the things that you can do is support a shelter. At 3:30, we are going to do our Pet of the Month segment, which we do with Mark Drugs and Anti-Cruelty. We have a new Pet of the Month up on our website. Snooky is there for you to take a peek at. But, if you're not in a position to adopt, maybe you could foster. You have to undergo a training program. No matter which shelter you want to foster with, you have to undergo a training program. I did it during the pandemic, so everything was online. You have to do some reading. You have to have an in-person online conversation and class. You have to take a couple of pop quizzes. And I don't know these days if you can do the whole process online or there's some in-person required, but if there is a shelter in your area, and I promise you there is, find out what's involved in becoming a foster. Maybe you aren't in a position to adopt an animal, but maybe for a few weeks, even if you can't commit to a long-term foster, people who are fostering sometimes go on vacation, and it has to be another person with foster training who steps in and watches the animal while they're on vacation, that takes them into their home for a week or maybe 2 weeks or sometimes just a long weekend. That is another thing you can do. It may not help when it comes to politics, but it is another thing that you can do to make the world a better place. Look into it. Every shelter needs fosters. Every shelter that I know of has a program that you can go through to be a foster. And there's all different kinds of fosters. Sometimes you take in an animal that's part of the SAFE program with Anti-Cruelty. That means that the family that the pet lives with is going through a tough time. Maybe they've lost their housing. And they need someone who can take care of their animal till they're in a stable situation again. The opportunities to help are more broad than you might think. So for some very short-term stuff to some long-term stuff. And it isn't just dogs and cats. Most shelters take in bunnies, guinea pigs. Some shelters take in chickens, for goodness sake. There's lots of ways to help. Think about that this holiday season. Find something that makes you feel good about yourself. And I can't think of too many things other than helping an animal that do that. We are going to take a break. We are going to be back with Pet of the Month right after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is time for Pet of the Month. This is your monthly palate cleanser, your little sorbet. Helping me out today is Craig Botagowski from Mark Drugs in Deerfield and Roselle, and Darlene Duggan, head of Anti-Cruelty. We are here to talk to you about Snooky. Snooky. I love the name. And I love Snooky. Looks like a very huggable dog. Anyway, Mark, welcome. Darlene, welcome. It is a Pet of the Month that I think we really need today. How are you both doing?
Doing well.
Doing
Thank
great,
you,
Joan. Thank you very much for having us.
Darlene, let's start with you. Tell us about Snooky.
Yes, you are accurate in your assumption of Snooky. She is a very huggable dog. She's a great girl. She's about 3 years old now, and she came into the shelter a couple of months ago. She was one of the animals that we pulled from Hurricane Helene when that was kind of wreaking havoc on our friends in the East Coast. We did take a shipment of dogs from the hurricane area and brought them up to Chicago to put them up for adoption. And I will be fully honest with you, she had a rough transition into care at Anti-Cruelty. It took her a bit of time to trust us and to kind of show her true personality. So we gave her a little bit of space, and we kind of let her just sort of cool out and get used to the sights and sounds and smells of our shelter and our care and everything. And boy, once she did she really show us her personality. She is a very, very loving, gentle dog, actually. For everything that we can tell, she's fine with other dogs. I think which, inevitably makes her a great companion for so many people. She's all around a good girl.
Oh, what a sweetie. When you say she had a hard time adjusting, I mean, I follow a lot of shelters and I look at a lot of videos, and, sometimes you see these dogs that are new to the shelter and they just go to the back of their crate or cage and just kind of curl up and don't want to come out and don't want to eat and don't want to do anything. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about? Shutting down like that?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, she was shutting down like that. She was, when we would try to go in to get her out of the cage to take her for a walk or to kind of just give her some exercise and out of cage time, she was resistant. She was giving staff a little bit of hard time with walking on a leash and just overall uninterested is what I would call it, uninterested in anything that we had to offer. Of course, we pulled out all of our tricks, giving her treats and sweet talk and kind of lots of, comfortable bedding and stuffy toys and lots of different types of food and, all of the things. And really, in all honesty, and this is what we find more often than not, she just needed some time. She was a stray dog down in Florida, and she ended up in the Florida shelter as a stray. And so she had that big adjustment to her life. And then, the hurricane comes and they were trying to get as many animals out of the way so that they could open their kennels for all of the displaced animals because of the hurricane. So then she gets on a transport vehicle and makes the long drive all the way up to Chicago and has to kind of get used to another new and, scary environment. And so it took her, like I said, about a week or so. And that's kind of typical, to be honest with you. It does take some of our animals a little bit of time to get used to the shelter environment. And
Darlene, if I was in a van sitting in the front seat traveling from Florida to Chicago, I would need time to decompress.
Absolutely. And so that's one of the reasons, too, when we do these kind of pulls from disaster areas. I think our supporters and our adopters are so eager to step in and help these animals, and they want to adopt them and they want to give them a home, and that's wonderful, and we love that. But sometimes we do delay putting them up for adoption just so that we can give them some time to decompress and kind of get used to everything, and they can show us their best side, and and then we can find them and make them the best match that we possibly can. So sometimes there is a little bit of delay, sometimes not. Mm-hmm. Every animal is different. But this was one of the cases where we needed to put the brakes. Best care for Snooki in this situation was to put the brakes on pushing adoption for her and give her a little bit of time and space to just sort of get used to everything. And like I said, once she did, and once she got through that, and once she started to trust, that we were here to care for her and for her best interests, she showed us her personality, and it is she's a special dog.
Craig, this is not necessarily a question that is relating to Snooki, who is 3, but there's a guy I follow on Instagram, Wolfgang2242, and he is I think he was an accountant, and he retired, and he decided that he was going to dedicate the rest of his life to taking in the unadoptable dogs at shelters, usually the dogs that are really, really old, that have medical needs. He announced recently that he's getting a dog, because now he's famous. And so there's some rescue, I think it's either in Florida or Texas, that's driving a dog up to him that he's going to get on Thanksgiving Day. 16-year-old dog who's blind and has hair standing out in every direction. And the guy was like, yeah, this looks like a perfect addition to our family. For older dogs like that, what's the best way to support them?
Oh, well, really, Joan, God bless Wolfgang, first of all. This is just an amazing story, and I should probably follow this guy, too, because, I have a friend of mine is also known for taking in older dogs that need a little more help. Now, he only got up to 3. It sounds like Wolfgang has that, he's got that he's got plenty more dogs than that and a big heart to take care of them all. When it comes to an older dog like that, usually they have a couple more health conditions, maybe a couple more complications. Like you said, he's getting a dog who's already blind. Now, clearly, the dog has adapted to his current state of not being able to see and being able to kind of get around, and hopefully they just need a little bit more time, a little bit more patience. And what the blessing with an old dog is that there's no mystery of what you're getting. Usually you know what their habits are, what their strengths and weaknesses are. They're going to be potty trained, but unfortunately when you get to the advanced ages, they might start to develop some incontinence. So someone like Wolfgang, really, and it kind of adds on to what you were talking about right before you got to us, right before the break, about how you can reach out and how you can make a difference in this world. You might not be, terribly happy with what's happened politically or what's going on in the world recently, but you can make a difference at the local level. And I do encourage people, like you did earlier, to, fostering is fantastic. If you don't have the time for that, if you volunteer at a place where, animals are taken care of at your local shelter, that could make a huge difference, and it'll help you as well. It's great that you're helping, socialize these animals and getting them acclimated to different humans being around, and kind of like what they did with Snooki. As it was said earlier, that Snooki was, kind of had been through a lot. Yeah. And Anti-Cruelty was great that they were available to take Snooki in to make room for all the animals that they knew that they were going to be getting after the hurricane. So just that really sets animal cruelty apart from others. That they have the capacity, they have the reach to be able to do something like that, to make room at a shelter that is not related to them, closer to where they knew the animals were going to be coming in. And in Snooki's case, who is not an older dog, and I guess kind of went through the trauma of being moved and now seems to be really getting along with some of her favorite humans, it seems like that's just a great a great story about like a transition that happens, and it's all about patience. And when it comes to the older dogs, older cats, I think that's the basics. I mean, there's medications that might help if they have certain conditions, chronic ear infections, chronic respiratory infections. I mean, with humans as well. These medical conditions tend to accumulate over time. So that's one thing. If you're going to be taking care of an older animal that has a history of certain types of health conditions, it's important that you are patient with them and try to introduce them to a new environment slowly so that you're not overwhelm them. But going back to your story about Wolfgang, I mean, this is really a hero in my book. It's someone who is definitely
he has,
taking
at this
care
moment
of,
in time, I believe he has 9 dogs, a pig, 2 chickens, and I think a rabbit.
And I mean, what a beautiful family photo that's going to be for the Christmas cards going out this year. But yeah, when it comes down to, especially when we're talking about an animal like Snooki, who at first had a little bit of trouble acclimating to the new environment. Now, although she is still at the shelter, she seems to be kind of coming out of her, out of her shell a little bit. I mean, this is like the perfect animal to be able to, if you're in that zone where you're able to foster, think about fostering one like Snooki, who needs to be out in the real world and not necessarily in the shelter, and just experience what it's like to be with a loving family. One of the bio things that was mentioned with Snooki, and if you go to markdrugs.com, WCPT website, or the Anti-Cruelty website, you'll see Snooki and how beautiful this dog is. But I guess one of the things that Animal Cruelty noticed that when she came in is that there was a small growth on one of her sides. And so, again, going above and beyond like Animal Cruelty does, they were able to have that growth removed, and now she's, it's something that would be very easy to kind of keep an eye on. So it's like a pre-existing condition that you have to worry about them developing. And with her kind of skin type and fur type, it's one that if anything were to come up, you'd be able to notice it very quickly. But it could be easily removed early on before it ever became a problem. So it's just, I do encourage people to kind of take a look at Snooki. If you're even somewhat interested in helping out, think about volunteering or fostering, because that can make a huge difference as far as whether an animal gets adopted. It's one thing that they might act a certain way at the shelter. It's how they act when they get into the home and actually interact with humans in a more of a normal environment.
Guys, we are doing Pet of the Month. We need to take a real quick break. I will be back with Craig Botagowski from Mark Drugs and Darlene Duggan from Anti-Cruelty right after this.
Get social with WCPT 820 and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WCPT 820.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is our monthly Pet of the Month segment. You can find our pet either on the Mark Drugs website or on the WCPT website. Our new dog is Snooki. I am joined by Craig Botagowski from Mark Drugs and Darlene Duggan from Anti-Cruelty. Darlene, I want to talk to you about some of the things that I've been seeing that are coming up for the holidays. First off, Home for the Holidays, I believe, starts tomorrow. Home for the Holidays. I'm having trouble with that, Darlene. Tell us about that.
You nailed it. You nailed it perfectly, Joan. So Home for the Holidays is our adoption promotion. Speaking of, all of this good stuff about, being able to take an animal home from the shelter, we are hoping that all of the animals in our care are going to find their perfect home just in time for the holidays coming up. So starting tomorrow and running through the end of December, all of our adoption fees are going to be waived.
Yay!
And that's for all, yes, exactly, yay. And that is for all of the animals that we adopt out. So the dogs, the cats, the small animals, the puppies, kittens, it doesn't have any restrictions. Any animal in our care, because remember, we are an open admission shelter, so sometimes we do get some fun, exciting things that pass through our doors. So for anybody that we have on site, all of the adoption fees are waived. So we're really hoping that that is going to help promote adoption through this holiday season and help these animals find a loving home for before the end of the year.
That is wonderful. And I also want to mention that on December 3rd, there's a dog adoption showcase. And does that mean Anti-Cruelty takes the animals somewhere, or is it an invitation to come to the downtown site? How does that work?
No, those showcases are in the community. So those are the events, and all of the information and locations can be found on our website. We do them periodically throughout the month. Those are us taking the animals into the community. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible to meet your new best friend. You don't even have to come into the shelter. Sometimes that's a barrier for people, either because of location or their work schedule or other commitments. It's difficult to get into the shelter. So we try to make it as easy as possible, and we bring some of our adoptable pets into the community. So you're right. We have our next one scheduled for just after Thanksgiving on December 3rd. And we're hoping that, again, the community will meet us and meet our animals and fall in love and start the new story for the pets in need right now.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's going to be truly amazing. So if you are thinking of acquiring a new family member, starting tomorrow through December 30th, all fees are going to be waived. And isn't that tremendous? Because sometimes I know that, and I know that there are programs, there are pet food pantries. If you have an animal and you fall on tough financial times, before you surrender the animal, contact a shelter like Anti-Cruelty or a shelter that's in your neighborhood and find out what kind of support there is, because a lot of them have pet pantries where you can get food or maybe you can get subsidized food. You know, the ideal is to keep a pet in a household. That's always the goal.
Yes. Yeah.
Craig, do you find that your business gets slower or busier around the holidays?
Usually it slows down just a little bit, only because people might have stocked up if they're going to be doing some traveling, and they travel with their pets, or for the humans as well. They generally will get like a 2-month supply of something, so that they don't run out and they don't have to worry about hours. And as far as like our pharmacy is open 9:30 till 6:30 most weekdays, but only 10 to 2 on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and then we close for holidays, so they're worried about running out of medication. So if anything, it slows down a little bit. We probably dispense as much medication. It's just a matter of people getting a 2-month supply instead of their usual 1-month supply. But I would like to also mention, like the key word that you mentioned there earlier, Joan. I mean, this is fantastic. That Anti-Cruelty, if you wanted to go check out Snooki, and if you fell in love with her, like I imagine it's very possible you would, especially if you see the picture that I put up there with her with the ball in her mouth. I mean, just adorable. But the adoption fee has been waived is amazing. But that's not where it ends with animal cruelty. I mean, if anything were to happen that afterwards, they're there to help you. They're there to help you with the resources of finding a veterinarian that will end up being her primary care veterinarian. They would help you if you did if you got in a situation where you didn't know if you could afford food. They definitely have resources that can help you out. And as far as if anything were to happen, let's say you get your heart set on adopting Snooki or any of the other lovely animals over at Animal Cruelty, and God forbid it just doesn't work out, there's no questions asked. You are able to return
Anti-Cruelty
the
is
animal
always willing to take a dog back or a cat. They would much rather take an animal back if you feel it's not working out or your situation changes than, for God's sakes, to leave an animal to fend for themselves.
Yeah, and they're just willing to just really give you the help that you need to make sure that this is going to be as smooth of a transition as possible and a permanent transition, because that's their goal here, is to make sure that you have the resources you need to make sure that this is a good home for the animal. So when you leave Animal Cruelty with Snooki or another one of their lovely adoptable pets, you're not on your own at that point. They're there to make sure that you have a good experience, and they'll give you tips, like if you do have other animals in the house, little things that you can do to make sure that they get along. And you might even choose to be one of those people who foster for a little while and end up being a foster failure, like Joan has at least 2 times by my count.
We don't need to talk about that.
but a foster failure is actually a success. It's something that means that maybe you weren't ready to take the plunge, and then as soon as you get them in your home and get them in your heart, then you fall in love, and that's it. The choice is made for you. So I do encourage people over the holiday season. This is a
good point, Darlene. Anti-Cruelty, like if somebody wants to take classes, do you guys offer classes? Do you recommend someplace to go for classes? Do you have a list of trainers who you think are good? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a whole team dedicated to what we call counseling, and that can be pre-adoption counseling or during the adoption counseling or even after adoption counseling, because sometimes when you get an animal in your home and you're really in the thick of potty training someone or acclimating, you need some support. So we have an entire department that's dedicated to that. We have internal resources. We have external resources. It's just subject matter experts as well as behaviorists and trainers. Our veterinary and our medical team are part of that counseling team. So no matter what stage of kind of animal care you're in, we have somebody that will help. And if we can't do it internal at Anti-Cruelty, we have a lot of contacts in the community and in the greater animal welfare field that we can source that out as well. That's one of our biggest pieces of interaction with the community is, earlier I had mentioned that we are an open admission shelter, so we will take any animal in any condition. But sometimes people are struggling in their home, whether it's behavior related or sometimes it's medical. And so they do call us, to help with whatever is going on in the home. And so it's not uncommon for our behaviorists to talk people through certain situations or, seek out additional training for their animals so that they can keep the human-animal bond going with that particular dog or cat or whatever kind of animal it is. So that is a very big piece of what we do, Joan.
And if somebody, is already has an animal and they want to get some training, is there like a list on your website, or do you have any advice? How do you choose? What are the guidelines that that mean you're finding a good trainer?
Yeah, I would definitely check out our website. We do have some resources about, specific to the Chicago area of good trainers or good places to look for that kind of support. We do have a behavior hotline, so people are welcome to call us and talk through something specific that they're trying to manage or trying to deal with. But in general, there are so many different resources out there, so I think sometimes it can be overwhelming when you can watch a training video on YouTube or you see the next, video come through or a person claiming to be a great trainer. And what I would recommend is to look at their accreditation, look at their history, look at the comments that are being made about them. In all honesty, I would also ask around in your neighborhood or people that you know and trust. Hey, where did you go for training with your dog? Or who did you contact when this problem arose? Word of mouth referrals, I think, are the best way to go because you know that somebody else that you know and trust has had a good experience with that person or that training company.
Yeah. Do people ask you questions like that, Mark, when they come in for pet meds? What are some of the questions you get from your people who are looking for over-the-counter or prescription pet medicines?
Well, a common question is, what the heck is this drug for? Because sometimes they go and get a med, and they don't understand that they might have a heart condition or some sort of asthma or some sort of allergy. So that's the number one question. But when it comes specifically for behavioral issues, they might see that, oh, wow, this is this drug, isn't this the generic for Prozac? I mean, my dog's not depressed. My dog just seems to be barking too much when I get home, or too excited, or has separation anxiety. Well, actually, that could be a drug that would be perfectly acceptable for separation anxiety and different types of behavioral issues. So drugs that might be used for a human for one condition, such as Prozac for depression in humans, they might use it for separation anxiety in pets. And another common question is, how long is it going to take for this stuff to work? Now, when it comes to certain behavioral issues, using one of those classic antidepressants, it'll take a couple of weeks for it to really kick in and do what they're trying to do. However, there's other things like trazodone, which they can use more for an immediate effect. Like, there's fireworks, and my dog is going to flip out and have a terrible time. Well, the veterinarian might prescribe something like trazodone, where humans typically only use it for sleep, but when it comes to animals, it just actually acts like a real, use it as needed chill pill, and we can flavor it up to make sure that the animal, doesn't throw it up or try to spit it out, because some of these drugs can be kind of bitter. But when you make a beef-flavored trazodone liquid, all of a sudden, the fireworks start happening, and you need the dog to kind of relax. Well, it can work pretty quickly. So, yeah, the number one question is definitely, like, the people just aren't necessarily, they don't know exactly what the drug is for. And once I tell them after that, usually how long will it take for it to kick in? And depending on what you're treating, something that is more behavioral modification typically takes, at least a week, if not longer, for you to notice certain effects, versus there are medications that are for breakthrough anxiety and just for, like, trying to put out the fire when the fire has happened, and then those drugs are intended to work immediately.
Yeah. Guys, it is always a pleasure to talk about pets and adoption and fostering. Thank you so much for being here today. Craig Botagowski from Mark Drugs in Deerfield and Roselle, and Darlene Duggan from Anti-Cruelty. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Joan. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Mike Nellis. He used to be a senior advisor to Kamala Harris. He has his own Chicago political company now. We are going to talk politics right after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live.
Celebrating our power to bring about change.
Local.
Everybody has to work together.
And progressive.
I think you get the idea.
On WCPT 820.
I am very pleased that Mike Nellis is here. He was a senior advisor to Kamala Harris in the before times. Now he is the founder and CEO of Authentic, a Chicago-based political fundraising and consulting firm. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, too. I'm going to surprise you by not talking about Kamala Harris at the start of this discussion.
Okay.
Rather, there's been a lot of talk about something that might be a little bit in the weeds politically for a lot of people, but that's who is going to be the next head of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, the part of the Democratic Party that raises funds, and some would argue it has the power to, in many ways, sort of set the tone or set the agenda. I've been reading about all different kinds of high-profile people who have been weighing in. David Axelrod famously is saying, well, that would be a great job for Rahm Emanuel because he's a great fundraiser. Robert Reich, the economist, has come out and said, no, Rahm would be the worst choice. We've got to get past this whole, we want the DNC to be more than just let's all reach out to really rich people and have them write checks. That we want the DNC to be reflective of the fact that maybe, just maybe, a more sort of blue-collar outreach would be a smarter move. Some people are talking about Ken Martin from Minnesota, who did a lot of good things with the Democratic Party there. Talk to me about, Robert Reich argued that the person who heads the DNC, while certainly fundraising is, the main job description there, that he thinks the head of the DNC should also try to sort of change the narrative about the Democratic Party, that it once was the party of the working class and that it should try to become that again. First of all, what do you think about the job? Should it just be limited to let's just pick the person who we know is great at raising money?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'll say is that the Democratic Party is the party of the working class. We just didn't do a good enough job of winning over working class voters in the last election, but we're the only political party that I would argue is actually fighting for working class people all across the country. The DNC chair race is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be the kind of thing where it'll get outsized media coverage relative to its importance. It's important, but it's going to be the kind of, I think, proxy battle for the future of the Democratic Party, and there's going to be a lot of different factions that are going to be trying to push their agenda here. The way I'm thinking about this is, and I don't have a candidate that I'm backing or not backing right now. I'm sort of going to wait and see how the field develops and see who puts together a vision before I decide if I'm going to support anybody. But I view it as the DNC chair has to do a couple things, and they sort of conflict with each other in terms of the skill set that people typically have. But the DNC chair is the chief spokesman for the party, chief spokesperson for the party in a time when we're the minority. So there's a necessary component of being able to go on TV, articulate a vision, talk about the future of the party, talk about the work that we're going to do, be able to movement build and create that. The second piece of it is fundraising. Fundraising is incredibly important. The DNC as an entity exists essentially, in my view, to elect a Democratic president and then to support state and local parties all across the country. So its ability to raise money and distribute that money and invest it in building strong state parties is incredibly important. And then the third aspect of it is to set the tone for the kind of campaigns that we're running and the organization and infrastructure that we're building. So I'm looking for somebody who can reasonably do all three. And it's a hard thing to ask one person to do. There have been times in the past where we haven't had one chair, but we've had like co-chairs. I think around 2004 they had co-chairs, and one co-chair was responsible for fundraising and chief spokesman. I believe it was Marty Walsh, and then I couldn't tell you who the other co-chair was. I apologize to whoever that person is if they're listening. But then the other person was responsible for party building, and there are three really important buckets. And like Rahm would be incredible at fundraising, no doubt about that. I don't know that he's exactly who I would put forward at this moment from like a chief spokesman role, and maybe there's a way to message around that, because as much as I like Rahm represents the past, right? Like Rahm was part of the Obama administration. Rahm was the mayor of Chicago. There are fresher faces out there. I've known Ken Martin for a while. I think he's an amazing party builder.
I don't know much about him until his name surfaced in multiple articles for this job. Tell me what you know about Ken Martin.
Yeah, so Ken is the head of the DFL, which is the Democratic Party in Minnesota. He's a Paul Wellstone guy. I'm also a Paul Wellstone guy. I got my start in Democratic politics because I read Paul Wellstone's book, A Conscience of a Liberal. And for those that might not remember, Paul Wellstone was a senator from Minnesota, and he died in a plane crash, but he was sort of the voice of, I would argue, the working class part of the Democratic Party, maybe filling the role that people today would see from a Bernie Sanders or a Sherrod Brown. And he was really an extraordinary leader who was very, very good at articulating what the Democratic Party should stand for at its best and what politics should stand for at its best. And I was just on vacation this weekend with my family, and my parents had their 40th wedding anniversary, and they rented a house in Florida, flew out there, and the book I brought was Conscience of a Liberal by Paul Wellstone, because I was deciding I was going back to basics. And within the very first couple of sentences, I was already like feeling the reasons that I had joined the Democratic Party. And he was talking about how all politics is personal, and that, no one should ever be questioning what the Democratic Party is doing to help working people. And I think Ken is very built in that mold. And before he took over, and I'm not endorsing anybody. I think Ken's great. I also think Ben Wickler, who's the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, would be really great. And there's lots of other people. But Ken helped rebuild the Minnesota Democratic Party. Hell, has helped elect a ton of Democrats in Minnesota, build a really strong party. It's the last state that's standing in the quote-unquote blue wall for the Democratic Party right now. And so I just think he's someone that, at that intersection, I could see him being a very effective chief spokesman. I could see him being a very effective movement builder and fundraiser, and I know he knows how to win elections. And so that's why he's an interesting candidate to me.
When you say that he helped rebuild the Democratic Party in Minnesota, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think that my understanding of it is, and again, I'm not from Minnesota. I did marry a woman from Minnesota, so she might actually be able to tell you more than I can. But I think before he took over, like, the state Democratic Party was in debt. I think they had struggled electorally. I think they had struggled to win statewide, and they've won a series of statewide elections now that I think has just put them in a really strong, solid position. And Ken is also the chair of ASDC, which is an organization that organizes all the state parties together. And so I've interacted with him at several of those meetings over time, because I work with a lot of state party organizations. And I've just always found him to be a really impressive guy that is very serious about winning and is not going to get caught up in the BS. Like, I tell people all the time, a lot of my clients and a lot of people who work for me, like 90% of the things that we talk about on Twitter don't matter to regular voters and are not things that people talk about. And the phrase is Twitter is not real life. I actually have a T-shirt. And if I was ever going to get a tattoo, I might actually have to have that tattooed on my arm. But he does a good job in my mind of like clarifying, like, how are we winning people over? How are we centering everything on people? And I think to a certain degree, the Democratic Party has gotten away from that. And if we want to win people back, we need to center everything in like how we're helping everyday people, because look at the exit polls from what happened 3 weeks ago. We won people who were making over $100,000. We lost narrowly with people making $50,000 to $100,000, and then we got creamed by people who are making less than $50,000. And I'm sorry, but Donald Trump is not going to do a single thing to help people who are making less than $50,000. But people are frustrated at us because inflation's been high over the last several years, and we didn't do enough to make them feel like we were going to do something about it. We didn't do enough to help alleviate the burden that they were feeling in their day-to-day lives. And we spent a lot of time talking about issues that are super important. And I don't want to like diminish any of these issues, but if they're not directly impacting your life in the same way that, going to the grocery store and filling up your gas tank is, it's a luxury for you to be able to vote for anything else other than your economic necessity. And so we need to get back to basics. I think Ken does a good job of articulating that. I think there'll be other candidates like Ben Wickler who can do that too.
You said that 90% of what we talk about on social media doesn't matter to the average voter. You also talked about inflation. I heard somebody say, or read somebody saying, that it maybe would have helped if you'd have had somebody like a Bill Clinton in the White House. Bill Clinton, who touted all of his successes and gains early and often, that Bill Clinton would be the first person to tell you about the great things that he had just done. And that really wasn't until he got into campaign mode for, what was going to be his second term. It didn't seem like Biden did a lot of that. It did a lot of that tooting of his own horn. Because, as you just said, the people who voted for Donald Trump is not going to help those people. And yet, they seem to come away with this idea somehow that their lives would be better under Donald Trump. Isn't that a messaging problem?
Some of it's a messaging problem. Some of it's also just a reality of what it's like to live or exist in this world problem. And I tell a lot of my clients this all the time, but put yourself in the shoes of what I, based on demographic and psychoanalytic data I have of what a median voter probably looks like, what an undecided voter looked like in this election. And it's probably somebody who is raising a couple of kids, is maybe working 2 jobs to get by. They are not following the news the way we are. I say this all the time, but anybody who has a Twitter account, or if you've migrated over to Blue Sky, which is the sort of alternative now that the left is rallying around. I have a Blue Sky account. I like it a lot. If you have one of those, you're probably not an undecided voter, and you're certainly not the median voter. And so I think that they're struggling to get by, and they're lucky if they have time to watch Monday Night Football, honestly, or disassociate for a few hours by watching a few YouTube videos that they like. And so I think we just have to be mindful of, we can do the best possible job that we can communicating any number of wins, but so many of it's going to be over people's head, and that's why the messaging has to be simple, repetitive, and bash people over the head of it. And I'll give Bill Clinton a lot of credit, and I'll give James Carville a lot of credit. They were really good. It's the economy stupid is still the best piece of political advice I've heard in my entire life. And it's right. And I think that if we had remembered that lesson in this election, maybe we could have turned it around. I don't know. I would argue we had some very serious headwinds against us, and that complicates everything. And I would argue, I actually think that Kamala Harris saved us from a worse election fate. I think based on the fundamentals, we probably should have faced a 1984 or a 2008 style wipeout versus the Republicans. But they ran, I think, a pretty bad campaign with a pretty bad candidate. And so we were able to salvage it into a place where we're in a stronger position than we should be. But going back to Bill Clinton for a second, there's an Obama era evolution here of, not touting our successes too much, not being super political. And I think that the Democratic Party has to regain some of the toughness or meanness or savviness, however you want to describe it, that Bill Clinton did have in the 90s. I think we've gotten away from some of that. And there's a moment in this campaign where Barack Obama was giving a speech, and he said something along the lines of, Joe Biden sent you checks, but you didn't see his name printed out in big letters like Donald Trump did. And he was bragging about that. And the minute I saw that, I was like, no, his Joe Biden's name should have been huge on it. We should have called him Biden bucks, and we should have bashed people over the head with that stuff. And so Democrats need to take swift and immediate action to help people, and then we need to never shut up about it.
That's right.
No one should ever question what the Democratic Party's done for you lately. And then same goes for infrastructure projects. We passed the largest infrastructure package in the history of the country, right? And there's going to be all these projects, but they're going to take 5, 10, 15 years to get done. What the heck? People are expecting us to help them now because their lives are at risk right now. They're struggling to survive every day. And we didn't put enough urgency behind that. And that's part of the reason that we lost. Now, that said, Donald Trump's not going to do anything to help people, and I think buyer's remorse will set in here pretty quickly, just like it did last time. And he's already off doing absolutely wild things, like trying to install Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. So it's
yeah, I want to talk to you more about that. We got to take a quick break. Mike Nellis is the founder and CEO of Authentic, a Chicago-based political advice and fundraising firm. We'll be right back after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820. WCPT replay.
For people saying Trump's some sort of peacenik.
Oh, yeah. You love that?
Yes, thank you for this tweet. You said Trump bombed Syria, Trump bombed Yemen, bombed Somalia. He assassinated a foreign military leader. In Iraq and Syria alone, Trump drone strikes killed an estimated 13,400 civilians. Trump increased troop levels in Afghanistan by 25%. Trump bragged about relaxing rules of engagement in Afghanistan, which nearly doubled civilian casualties. Trump pulled out of the INF, out of the Open Skies Treaty. Trump loves Putin's slaughter of Ukrainian civilians, calling it genius and savvy. Trump pulled out of the Iran nuke treaty, even though our military insisted Iran was complying, so any future Iranian nukes will be 100% thanks to Trump. Thank you, John Fugel, saying...
Here to help.
Keep up
Here
the
to help.
facts. Here at the Stephanie Miller Show. Thank you.
Keep listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Attention, everyone. Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Mike Nellis, who, by the way, is in it for the long haul. Mike is going to be around. Aren't you also doing Patty's show tonight, Mike?
Yes.
I thought so. With Ken Mejia Beal?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, well, we'll pace ourselves, so I won't try to exhaust you during this hour.
Well, I was told we're taking some calls, so we'll have plenty of time.
Okay. You know, you talked about how Obama was bragging about how Biden didn't sign the checks that went out to people, and I agree with you. I actually have proof that was a mistake. My daughter-in-law teaches at a largely African-American middle school, and she teaches social studies, and she asked her kids in one class, you know, if they knew, like, who their family was going to vote for. And she said a lot of the kids said that their parents were going to vote for Trump because he gave them money last time he was in office.
Yeah, I believe that. I fully believe that. People remember stuff like that, and we just didn't do enough to provide direct and immediate relief to people. Like, look, inflation is not the Democratic Party's fault. There's a global inflationary problem that's been happening for the last several years, which is actually related to COVID. And we can get into some of that if you want. But to me, we spent so much time telling people how good the economy was in a way that I think was really unhelpful. And the number of times I've heard, you know, from some Democratic leader or some pundit on TV, 49 out of 50 Nobel laureate economists are saying that our economy is the envy of the world. And I'm like, well, if people aren't feeling that, it doesn't matter. And so, like, you know, the tagline that I heard during the commercials was, you know, WCPT, where facts matter, right? And facts do matter, and data and statistics do matter. I don't want to say that they don't, but what really matters to people is what they're feeling and experiencing in their day-to-day lives. So, like, if we have a bunch of economic data that suggests the fundamentals of the economy are strong, to paraphrase John McCain from 2008, but people aren't feeling it, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. If their paychecks aren't growing, and if their dollars being stretched, and if they're struggling to buy a house and retire with dignity, they're not going to vote for us. And particularly for young people, like, if you're, you know, 18 to 22 right now, and this is your first presidential election, and your frame of reference for leadership on the economic level is this administration. And again, I think Joe Biden was a good president. I think he navigated the economic headwinds that we faced very, very well. It just didn't translate to people, and then we didn't do enough job providing that relief. You're going, God, I just graduated. How do I get a job? How do I start a family? How do I buy a house? How do I retire with dignity? And I think that was playing out across multiple demographics. And if you look at the data that we've had over the last year and a half, people were screaming at us. And we found, you know, we tried to make this election about other issues.
Wasn't that the point of things like when Kamala said she was going to put a program in place to give a $25,000 credit to first-time home buyers to get more young people in the market? I mean, it seemed like she understood and was trying to offer things that would appeal to those in difficulty, but it just, I don't know. Do you think it just didn't, resonate? Didn't have time to sink in?
I think people didn't trust us. I really think it's as simple as that. I think it's, if you're going to help me after this election, why aren't you helping me now? Why haven't you helped me over the last couple of years? And again, I think there's the reality of, like, what the administration was doing and trying to do to help people, and then there's the way that people felt, and it's hard to build that trust. I mean, I think Kamala Harris was put in a really difficult position in this election. She took over the ticket with 103 days left until the election. She built what I think was an amazing campaign, not perfect, but amazing, and I think saved us from a worse fate. But you know, it's because Donald Trump didn't really articulate an economic vision for the country. Like, if you polled and talked to people, they couldn't tell you, like, what he was going to do to help people. They might be able to tell you about the tariffs, but, like, the impact of the tariffs are going to increase inflation, and people don't know that. But I think it really, if you just try to boil it down to, like, the political science aspect of it, if I can use my political science degree for the first time in 20 years, it really is as simple as the party in power was punished for a bad economy. Like, it's really as simple as it is. And I don't think that there's any economic policy that Kamala Harris could have come out with that would have changed the tide on that.
Yeah, I think so. Is this 2020 hindsight as you look back on this loss? Because in the weeks and days leading up to this election, honest to God, Mike, I mean, not that my track record is 100%, but I really thought we were going to do this. I really thought that we had done everything right, and where this silent majority of people voting for Trump came from, it blew me away. I mean, it blew me away. Did you feel in the final days and weeks that she had pulled this out, that we were headed to the White House, or did you have concerns even then?
Yeah, I thought she was going to win this election. I thought it would be close, and I was pretty consistent over the course of that 100 days saying that I thought it was going to be a close election. And, you know, the Harris campaign was always talking about being the underdog, and I thought that perspective was right. But I thought in those closing weeks they had done a good job of articulating their vision, and that Trump had made enough mistakes that, you know, she was going to pull it out. And my assumption would be that she'd probably win with similar margins to what we saw from Joe Biden 4 years ago. But a good chunk of people stayed home. But let's keep in mind, like, there's a ton of variance, and you can only make the best analysis that you can with the information that you have. And I think it was reasonable to see that, you know, Kamala Harris was in a position to win, and it just didn't happen the way that we wanted to. And that's too bad. But this race was really only decided by 235,000 votes in 3 swing states. In fact, we were super close to what I think would have been a hilarious scenario where Kamala Harris would have won the Electoral College and Donald Trump would have won the popular vote. And I say hilarious only because of, like, that's happened to us twice in my lifetime. And honestly, had Kamala won the Electoral College and a majority of Americans voted for Trump, I still think Trump should have been president then, because I don't believe in the Electoral College, and I think it's a terrible system to decide the presidency.
I agree with you, but if we're going to give Republicans the presidency when they win the Electoral College, I think we have to take it when we win the Electoral College, too.
100%. What I didn't see coming, I didn't see the swings as big as they were outside of the battleground states. And some of that is that, you know, I spent so much time, and I was working on a lot of, like, battleground races, and I was doing a lot of, like, house races. Like, you know, my firm does work for Angie Craig in Minnesota, and Pat Ryan in New York, and a whole bunch of others, Lauren Underwood here in the Chicagoland area. And so I was looking at the polling, and what I was seeing was this race looks an awful lot like 2020 to me. And I think if you look in the battleground states, it does look like 2020 with just Kamala Harris falling a little bit short. What I didn't see, because I wasn't looking at, like, statewide New York data or statewide Illinois data or stuff like that, was how poor we were doing statewide in other states. And so when you see, like, an 8 to 10 point swing in New York, that's a huge problem. Mm-hmm. And so what I just didn't see was people being that mad at us about the economy. And I knew people were mad about the economy. I think they have every right to be. And I thought that, you know, the Republicans were running a poor enough candidate and a poor enough campaign that we could overcome that and then start to fix that stuff. But it just wasn't in the cards. And the truth is, I think had Joe Biden stayed on the ticket, or if Republicans had nominated a more competent, reasonable Republican candidate, like if they had nominated Nikki Haley, I'm pretty sure that she would have won like 40 states, and that we might be down to, we might only have 40 Democratic senators, and that's even more terrifying than the situation we're in right now.
Yeah. Mike, we need to take a break. I'm talking to Mike Nellis. He's the founder and chief executive of Authentic, a political advising and fundraising firm in Chicago. We're going to be right back after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Mike Nellis, who you are going to have the pleasure of listening to until 7 o'clock tonight, because he and Ken Mejia Beal are filling in for Patty Vasquez tonight. Mike, in the last week, I had an interview with a woman who writes a newsletter. I read what Tom Nichols was writing in The Atlantic, and they both had opposite visions for what the Democratic Party needs to do. I talked to Marissa Kabas, who writes a newsletter called The Handbasket, and her take was that that part of the reason why we hurt ourselves was not fully and completely embracing our progressive side, that we damaged, the Democratic Party damaged itself by trying to move too much to the center. Tom Nichols' argument in the Atlantic is almost the polar opposite of that. He says that going forward, the Democratic Party has to basically not try to cater to every group that has a position on a certain issue and wants the Democratic Party platform on that issue to be whatever it is they want. He said that the people behind the Democratic Party need to step back, and they need to be pragmatic, and they need to look at what do we need to do to win. And if that means that we cannot embrace a certain proposal from a certain political group that considers themselves Democrats, that position has to not be embraced. I don't know if I'm saying this clearly. If you think you understand, weigh in on this.
Yeah, I understand.
If you follow my convoluted words here.
Yeah, my least favorite type of post-election commentary is we lost/won because of this thing that I'm always talking about, and had we just done this other thing that I'm always advocating for, we would have won and everything would be great. And there's so many people out there that are like, if you're, and I'm not a movement progressive. I'm much more of a pretty pragmatic moderate. Although I worked for Bernie Sanders in 2016, so I don't think anybody can question my progressive credentials. But I get super frustrated when like the same group of people on the left are like, well, if they had just embraced these like very far left proposals on economics, if they had just done exactly what Bernie Sanders did in 2016, we would have won. And then you'll find the sort of like triangulation folks that'll do the same and be like, well, if we had just moderated and been more like Republicans, we would have won. And I don't really think that's right. Like in a lot of situations, it's usually a yes and where there's sort of bits and pieces of things you can take, and everybody's got their perspective, and I'll give mine, but I tend to take it as like we're 3 weeks out from a loss. We don't have even a fraction of the information, the data that we're going to have in the coming months to figure out why we lost and what we need to do. And we don't know the terms of which the next election will be set because we just don't know what the next couple of weeks and months and years looks like with Trump. And that's one of the challenges with Trump, is always trying to figure out where the rhetoric stops and the action begins and what he actually is trying to do and think about. So, but if I had to put a marker on where I think the Democratic Party should go from here, I would basically put it in 3 different buckets. The first bucket would be the economy, the second one would be culture, and the third one would be campaigns and the actual work that we're doing to win. On the economy, I tend to believe that embracing simple, populist, and direct economic policies will make the Democratic Party stronger. And what I'd like to see us get away from is these, 12-point plans that are going to do X, Y, and Z, that are complicated, that are tax breaks, that don't provide direct and immediate relief, that are difficult to explain, that usually have goofy Washington, D.C. sounding names, and just go with very basic stuff. And something I liked about Bernie's presidential campaign, for example, was Bernie would say, we're gonna do college for all. We're gonna do healthcare for all. Everybody's gonna get access to this. And it was broad and it was direct. And then you compare that to kind of like where the party landed, which is we landed in a place where we talked a lot about student loan debt relief, which I think is a good idea and I support it. But it creates an inherent have and a have not, which is a bit of a problem. And then it can be convoluted to explain, like, oh, we're forgiving these people's debt, but we're not forgiving this person's debt. And I was promised this, but I didn't get this. And that's a problem. And instead of creating policies that are like, probably like a set of things, but the front line is we're getting everybody health care. We're going to get everybody into college. We're going to give everybody a good job and opportunity, and just sort of broadening that out in a more populist way. And then on the culture front, and this is where I'll probably be the most controversial. Like, I do think the Democratic Party has lost the culture war. I think we are frustrating a lot of people with not even so much the things that we say, but the way that we say them. And I think if we're perceived by a large part of the population as lecturing people about what they should or shouldn't believe, what they should or shouldn't say, what they should or shouldn't enjoy, that's going to be a problem. And I think that is something that drags us down. And I think it particularly drags us down in red states and red districts, where we could go in there and have real conversations about the economy and public infrastructure and things that'll make a direct and immediate impact on people's lives, but they don't like or trust us. And to be clear, when I'm talking about culture, I'm not sitting here suggesting that we abandon trans kids or anything like that. I'm really tired of listening to politicians and pundits say that the reason we lost this election is because of the transgender community, because it's not. I think we need to do a better job of figuring out how we talk about these issues. And I think we need to remind ourselves that we get to decide what we talk about and how we talk about it. We don't have to let the media or our opponents define how we talk about this stuff. But we need to be smarter about how we approach it, because I've seen a lot of compelling evidence that and for those who haven't seen it, I have to imagine everybody saw it, but that final closing Trump ad, which talked about Kamala Harris, it played a clip of Kamala Harris talking about transition surgery for transgender or for inmates, for prison inmates, and then ended with an incredible tagline, which was that Kamala Harris is for they, them, not you. I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest political ads of all time. And as uncomfortable as it makes me and as disgusting as it is, it's like the Willie Horton ad. It's disgusting, but like it's incredibly effective, and a political professional could tell you why. We lost votes because of that. I believe that. I don't think it's why we lost the election, but we lost votes because of it. And
Mike, I have an observation, and
Sure.
I'd like you as the political expert to weigh in on this. I was talking about this with my partner, Ray, and I said, when she gave that interview, it kind of surprised me. I mean, obviously at the time, she didn't realize that she would be running for president. She didn't realize this was going to be a clip that was going to come back to haunt her. But you talk about, I think you make an important point about the way we talk about things. She could have looked at that interviewer and said, you know what? I believe in health care. I believe that if people need health care, if people need medical treatment, that should be available to everybody. She didn't have to get into the whole trans thing. It should have just been about, I believe every human being in the United States of America has a right to health care and has a right to be cared for. I mean, she could have answered that without being so trans specific, and she would have been just as supportive of the idea, and she would not have created I think politicians nowadays have to know that anything they say down the road can be used against them.
Yep.
And I think that they have to be smarter. There was I think, a loving, kind, embracing way to answer that question that would not have come around to bite her in the butt.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about how we can do a better job of advocating for the trans community, right? Because I think what you just said was really, really smart, which is pivoting these issues to be like, I believe everybody should have access to the health care that they need to make the choices that they need, which is a very broad statement, but supportive, and is not going to diminish anybody. And when we're talking about organizing for the trans community, one of the biggest issues that I hear from trans activists that I meet is about housing discrimination. And I think everyone in this country can relate to that. And Republicans are gonna make a false assumption based on winning this election 3 weeks ago that they can just keep bashing the trans community. But actually, they have a very poor record of when they bash the trans community. Republicans have tried to do like this weird bathroom stuff, and largely the voting population has rejected stuff like that and been like, that's ridiculous. Why are you talking about that? So Nancy Mace this week, trying to prevent Congresswoman-elect Sarah McBride from being able to use the congressional bathrooms because she's transgender, is wrong. Is going to cost them votes and is the wrong side of the culture war. Where they can get us, though, is when we start talking about things that the people don't understand and can't relate to on some level. And to a certain degree, like the conversation about transgender athletes playing sports is confusing to people, and they don't understand it, and it scares them, and that kind of gets away from us a little bit. I think the inmate stuff sort of got away from us a little bit, and we need clearer answers to those things and how we talk about them. But it should always be a pivot back to, here's how I'm going to help the most of us. Mm-hmm. And that includes the transgender community, because we're building a coalition that has the biggest tent, right? Like, we built a coalition that had a tent from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney, which got to be the biggest tent in the history of American politics. Just wasn't big enough, unfortunately. But we just got to do a better job talking about this stuff. But I want to make it super clear. We should not stop fighting for the people that we love, and we should not stop fighting to make sure that people have the rights to like live a life with dignity and get a good paying job and have health care access. Because like I'm very frustrated with like every member of my party, and there haven't been that many of them, but they've gotten outsized reporting that wants to, throw the baby out with the bathwater here. And I just think that that's wrong. And then the third bucket of things, just to add one final point on this, we need to do a better job of how we run our campaigns. We need to do a better job of how we build strong Democratic parties throughout this country, and we need to do a better job of how we synthesize and analyze data. And just to give you one, I could spend hours talking about this, but on the campaign front, the Harris campaign had, and this is just based on the public reporting that's been out there, the Harris campaign had evidence that they believed told them that transgender ad that we were just talking about wasn't making an impact in the election. And I don't know what data that was, but let me assume it was probably some modeling that they had and some polling data that they had. And meanwhile, door knockers in battleground states all across the country were reporting back to headquarters, people are asking us about this ad, and I don't have an answer for them. And so we need sort of like a qualitative.
Why was there that disconnect between what people were learning? I mean, shouldn't that be something that the national campaign goes out of their way to find out? Hey, you've got 1,000 people this weekend door knocking. They all get debriefed afterwards. What are the big issues? What are the concerns? I mean, isn't that kind of politics 101?
Yeah, I think it's some sort of breakdown in the communication. And keep in mind, it's a campaign that only existed for 100 days. Like, typically you get a lot more time to build a presidential campaign. But we have to do a better job of listening at every level of the organization and gathering as much data as we can. And we can't, polling is fundamentally broken. I don't care what anybody says. Polling is still just a snapshot in time. And so we need to listen to we're having conversations. They knocked on more doors in the history of America over the final weekend. We should be doing what we can to make sure that the people who are knocking on doors have the answers that they need that are effective to help them push through some of this right-wing stuff, because they defined Kamala Harris as being weird. Which is absurd to me, because the Trump-Vance ticket was super weird, and supported all kinds of crazy stuff. And again, I think the race came down to the economy, and I want to make that super clear. But we do have a tendency on culture to turn off a certain segment of the population. If we can do a better job of communicating on those issues and do a better job of figuring out how we talk to people with a shared language without being seen as lecturing them or nagging them. I sometimes joke, sometimes the Democratic Party makes me feel like they're my dad yelling at me for wearing a backwards baseball cap. And I get a little bit tired of it too. And I'm a proud member of the Democratic Party. So how must a regular person who isn't maybe moving at the pace of progress that I want them to, or that I am, feeling about that? And I just have to imagine it's part of where we're losing people.
We need to take another break. I'm talking to the founder and CEO of Authentic, a Chicago-based political advising and fundraising firm. And, Mike, you should not wear your baseball cap backwards. My preference, Mike, would be for you not to wear a baseball cap at all. Okay?
Well, I'm sorry for wearing my baseball cap to this interview then. My bad. Does it help that it's a camo ad?
No. There's nothing worse than baseball caps. Oh. No one should wear them. They should be banned. They should be illegal. But that's a discussion for another time.
You just lost every Cubs fan and the remaining White Sox fans after last season.
Okay, that would be the exception. If you're going to the ballpark, that's a baseball cap. If you're wearing it to a baseball game, that's appropriate. Nowhere else in the world. Mike Nellis and I will be right back after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Now back to Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm speaking to Mike Nellis, the CEO and founder of Authentic. He was also a senior aide to Kamala Harris. He is going to be sticking around. I personally am going to be hanging up my spurs in about 10 minutes. Mike, God love him, baseball cap or no, is going to stick it out until 7 p.m. tonight with Ken Mejia Beal. Patty is off tonight. And just as a reminder, because I'm sure you want to put this down on your calendar, I'm off all next week. I'm going to go somewhere fun with my daughter, and then I'm going to eat too much on Thanksgiving, and I will probably eat too much the next day as well. Then I will sleep all day. Anyway, it's going to be a good week.
That sounds awesome. I'm super jealous.
Doesn't it? Eating and sleeping, yeah. Mm-hmm. Those are two of my favorite things in the whole world. So, Mike, I know that you and Ken are going to be taking some calls today when you fill in for Patty. Are you going to be having any guests?
I'm honestly not sure, to be honest with you.
Well,
my guess would be yes.
I actually have an answer to that. Apparently, Mary Jo Mullen is going to join you. who's the owner of the Sweet Spot Bakery and also happens to be candidate for the mayor of Lisle. So kind of a foodie Thanksgiving political thing all wrapped up in one.
I love that. We also have a couple other guests. We have Jinsu Daniel Hugh, who is the caucus chair for the Victory Fund of the Midwest. We have Nicole Johnson, who is a local journalist, will be on. And then Leeson Hillenberg Buell, and I apologize if I mispronounced anyone's name, but they are the development manager for Youth Outlook.
Okay, well, I only know about the one guest. If you say there are more, I will take your word for it.
Well, the fantastic Lady B just handed me sheets of paper so that I could say it. So.
Okay, well, if it came from Lady B, we know it's right.
That's right. I'm ride or die, Lady B. Right now,
yeah,
so.
And that's a smart way to be, baby, because she can save your bacon.
Yep.
And I'm glad she's going to be around to help you guys out. So what are your plans for Thanksgiving?
So we were supposed to head home. My family lives in Nebraska, so we were going to go home to visit my folks and my wife's folks. But my wife is having a minor outpatient procedure on Friday, and we couldn't figure out the logistics. So tomorrow we're going to have a Friendsgiving with a bunch of my friends, and they're going to come over and watch football. And we're going to just everybo's bringing their favorite appetizer. So we're just going to eat appetizer for dinner, and we're going to make a big charcuterie board. And then on Thursday, my wife, I, and our son will probably I think we're going to make like pasta, probably homemade pasta from scratch.
Well, that's nice. I'm glad that you're going to be around to take care of her. You say the Friendsgiving is tomorrow?
Friendsgiving's tomorrow, yep.
So that means you're watching college football, 100%. Right?
Yep. I'll be watching Notre Dame play Army because I'm a graduate of the University of Notre Dame.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know,
You can't see I'm literally wearing a Notre Dame baseball cap right now that you disapprove of.
Oh, dear God, did you have to go there? Really? I'm just getting ready to feel good and leave on vacation, and you just kind of get to stick it. You just gotta kind of needle it right there.
Well, you're handing the airwaves over to a degenerate wearing a baseball cap. I'm going to wear it backwards for the whole hour with Ken.
That makes me sad. I don't understand where that tradition started, but I actually once moved out of an apartment building because every time I got in the elevator, there were men with backwards baseball caps, and I thought, this is not where I want to live. I do not want to ride the elevator with these people. I do not want to know them. I do not want to speak to them. And I moved away. This is how strongly I feel about the whole, okay, maybe there were a few other factors, but the baseball cap thing was part of it too.
Well, I assure you, us backwards baseball cap wearing dudes are okay. We're not so bad once you get to know us.
No, I think, sweetheart, I think you need to do some soul searching here.
I mean, I'm one of the founders of White Dudes for Harris. I think I'm way down the rabbit hole at this point. I'm officially a dude bro in every sense of the word. So.
Yeah. So is it too soon? Do you think, because Gavin Newsom's already making noises about running in the next election. He's not being overt, but J.B. Pritzker sure looks like he is kind of being very careful about what he says and does. When do you think we're going to see the first person officially declare?
Do you know that when you're doing the dishes and you stick like a fork in the dispenser and it makes that loud, horrible noise?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the noise I heard when you started asking me about 2028 presidential candidates. I have no idea who's going to run. Obviously, Gavin's basically ready to announce tomorrow, probably. But the one thing about it is I'm not going to say which candidates I like or don't like, but I think something that gets undercovered here is that Democrats have a really great bench of talent, whether it be from the Senate or the House or our governors or some of the other players in the space. We're going to have a very vibrant field that will, I think, be pretty fired up, ready to try to win this next election and move the country forward. And the Republicans, in my opinion, don't have as good of a base. I think that a good of a bench. I think Trump has kind of squeezed all the oxygen out of the room so that he's the only one who can exist. And I was not super impressed with J.D. Vance in the last election as the VP candidate. I don't think he was terrible, but I don't think he was great. So it'll be interesting to me to see who runs on the Republican side. But it'll be interesting because 2 years from now, everybody's going to be launching their campaign, and we're going to have 2 open primaries again, which I think the last time we had that was 2016.
An open primary already exhausts me, that idea.
Yep.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I just think we don't know at this point who is going to emerge as the perfect candidate. One thing that I will say is I hope it's a man, and as a woman, it makes me sad to say that, because I just don't think this country is ready to pull the trigger on a woman. They've told us that twice, and the next election is too important to mess around.
I disagree with you. Like, I think that, look, racism and sexism are very real things, so I don't want to diminish the fact that they're real. But I don't think we lost either of the last two times against Trump because our candidate was a woman. And I think... I'm not saying that
I would love to believe that, and I know that it's kind of one of those things that's tricky to try to show up in the data.
Yeah.
But I really think that if we had a white male, I think things might have been different. I think it was a bridge too far, especially for some more traditional male voters.
I tend to believe that anybody who wouldn't have voted for Kamala Harris for that reason was probably not going to vote Democratic anyway. And I think the economic headwinds were really strong. And I also think the reverse of that is that there are a lot of constituencies that Kamala Harris fired up dramatically, whether it be online fundraising or turnout front. And so it's all about trade-offs, right, with stuff like that. But I would have no reservations nominating a woman 4 years from now for president. I wouldn't, because I just don't think that's the core of the reason that we lost. Again, not saying that it's not present. I'm not saying
that it was the sole reason, but I think when you feel you've got a handle on the post-election data, I'd really like you to walk me through it. Let's do that, okay?
I'd be happy to.
Wonderful. I'm going off for a week. Mike Nellis is still going to be working for the next couple of hours. And that's as it should be. Lady B, thank you for everything. I will see you guys Monday, December 2nd. Okay? I will see you then. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. Have a great weekend, and good night.